Hey everybody, spoilers for The Great Gatsby. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Script Department. Today I'm joined by Fiona to continue our Baz Luhrmann retrospective. This time we're talking about The Great Gatsby. Old sport. I had to throw that in.
Oh gosh, enough of the old sports.
I know, it's really annoying catchphrase, isn't
It's
it? It's
really
really annoying.
annoying.
It's really
Yeah.
annoying. And I never noticed it until Family Guy pointed out how annoying it really is. I'm going to be talking about the Family Guy episode.
Love it.
Before we get into that, if you haven't already, do like and subscribe to all our socials, YouTube, Instagram, etc., etc. All the links are in the description. You know the deal by now. Subscribe to our podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, just search for The Script Department and check out our website, thescriptdepartment.net, to see what our global network of screenwriters are up to. You can also buy us a coffee. And the link is down below for that as well if you want to support the channel. Okay, Fiona.
Yes.
We're both fans of The Great Gatsby story, I imagine.
We are. And we're fans of Baz Luhrmann.
Yeah.
Let's just put that out there.
Yeah, we wouldn't be doing a retrospective otherwise.
No.
We can be quite nerdy on Baz.
True.
But I think we're not totally sold on this movie, are we?
No, I think it's probably...
You're definitely not.
No, definitely not. And I think it's probably the one of Baz Luhrmann's where I'm probably the least amount of love for this film. I love the story. I love the F. Scott Fitzgerald story, and I love which I've talked about loads of times on this podcast, how I love the original, the 1974 version with Robert Redford. But I'm not going to labor on that today because I know I need to just deal with that. But there are some very specific screenwriter related reasons why I have challenges with this adaptation, if you like, by Baz. So yeah, caveating it all, if that's a word, with the fact that I generally think Baz is amazing and love so many of his films, but there are some really specific weaknesses, I think, in this film. From a screenwriting point of view. So it'd be good to dig into those a bit.
So I read the book. I think I read the book while I was either in America or I was traveling, I remember. And
Not
it
at
was
school? You didn't read it at school?
No. Yeah, I mentioned, I think, before in a previous episode, we were showing American History X, which is not something you should really be showing teenagers or young kids, you know.
It's such a strange decision.
It is, I know, right? You know, but I don't know. Maybe it taught us not to judge a person by the color of their skin. So, but I remember. No, I remember how I got this. So I was at the airport. I think I was in America, and I think Esquire were doing this like 10 books every man should read or something like that. I don't know. And Gatsby was, and they were giving them away, and you could pick your book. And I just thought, Great Gatsby.
And what does that say? What does that say? Yeah, they were giving them away.
I don't know. Yeah, and they were free with the. And I was reading it, and I think The Old Man to See was there as well. And I think I bought like 2 or 3 of the magazines, and I just like left them in the airport lobby, I think. Anyway, so I had The Old Man to See, and then I had Great Gatsby and something else. But anyway,
right.
and I really enjoyed the book. I really enjoyed reading it. And then when I found out, I think one of the reasons I read it was because I knew Baz Luhrmann was doing a big DiCaprio kind of epic with it, and so I was like, okay, I'll get into it before. And I'd heard a lot about the book and everything, but I really enjoyed the book. But when I saw the movie, I think I was more kind of caught up in it's a big Hollywood lavish production with DiCaprio, and you just kind of forget that you're watching a movie that actually has some really clumsy storytelling. And I didn't really notice that until Family Guy did an episode about it. I don't know if you remember. I don't know if you watched Family Guy.
I watched some. I haven't watched that one. I'm going to track it down now. You mentioned it.
So Family Guy did an episode where Peter Griffin. It's a great episode. Peter Griffin is locked in a library somewhere, and he's and like the police are like surrounding the building or whatever. And while he's waiting for the police to arrest him, he just decides to read us some great Hollywood or some great American literature, and The Great Gatsby is first, and it's all the characters playing different characters in Gatsby.
Gotcha.
And it's like the whole story condensed into like 7 minutes, something like that. It's really brief, but it does this amazing job of highlighting all the problems with the story, like in the novel,
Right.
like
Right.
the plot contrivances and the coincidences and just
Yeah.
insane coincidences, like Nick Carraway's cousin lives across the river from
Yes.
where he stayed, like, weird things like that. And then like the idea of
Yeah.
them driving the different cars at the
Yes.
end that ultimately contrives in the cars, and then the whole idea of like, I'm going to kill you because you were the one,
Yes.
because I saw
You were
you
the one
in
in the
in
car.
the car
Yeah.
earlier, even
Yes,
though you're not the
exactly.
person driving it. It's very strange, it's very weird, and you don't notice it until the the team at Family Guy pointed out to you. But and here's the end of my rant then. Give Baz Luhrmann credit for masking all of that,
Yeah,
because
okay.
I didn't notice any of that
Yeah.
when I was, I think it's easy to not pick up on those things when you're reading a chapter here or a chapter there at an airport and you're not really totally like immersed in the story.
Yeah.
But sitting in a movie theater, I'd be the first one to say, wait a minute, you know? And I didn't. And I think, and I talked about our, when we talked about Strictly Ballroom, I talked about how, very rushed Fran and Scott's relationship build is, but how it's seamless. It feels
That's
totally
right.
fine. I don't feel like I'm being shortchanged on anything in that film. And
Yeah,
whereas
true.
my criticism, for example, if somebody had presented me that script, I'd say, "Oh, that's very quick, isn't it? The way they become friends and the way they decide to work together and everything." But it works in
Yeah.
that movie, and I think to Baz's credit, he makes aspects of this film that I think in the hands of anybody else would have just been glaring plot holes or glaring contrivances. I think he makes them work because he has this way of just putting this kind of polish over everything. This kind of
Mm.
this his editing style and his just the way, the musical numbers and all that kind of stuff. It just, I don't know. There's just a way of it all just feeling like it can
Coming
click
together.
more than it might in the hands of somebody else. So that's my defense of Baz Luhrmann. Now I want to hear what you
Nice.
have to
Nice.
say. I
Start
want
with
to
the
hear you rip
defense.
it
I
apart.
like it. Okay.
Okay.
I'm not going to rip it apart. I'm going to rip some specific aspects apart. But that's really interesting. And I think you're right. I was just considering that while you were talking about it. And I think you're quite right. I was wondering about, do we not notice them because we know the story so well? But I actually think you're right. I actually think it's the way Baz tells the story through that film aesthetic that that we love so much, that I don't think serves him in this movie. But I think you're absolutely right about what it does from the plot holes of the original piece of literature, if you like. So yeah, definitely. And I guess my sort of criticism that I think I've said already on several podcasts is about the sort of the Basmataz splendor that we love so much about his aesthetic as a filmmaker, if you like. That we see the story unfold in front of us, that it's magical and it's luxurious and luscious and rich and all those wonderful things, but it does make us stand slightly apart from it. It doesn't make us immerse so much in the story and the characters, for me at least, generally. And I think that's my general criticism
Hmm.
of this movie, because I just am not sure about whether this is the right film for that style of filmmaking, I guess. It's something that I think he pulled right back on with Elvis. And if anyone hasn't listened to our Elvis podcast, Marcus and I had a chat about that. And I think Baz's filmmaking has really changed quite markedly around that, which I thought serves him better, and certainly in terms of that film. But for this one, I just think it's about what the movie's about and what the story is about and the themes of the story and things like that. So if I go back a little bit, if we start with how the movie's framed and we look at the framing device, which is new to this particular version, which is Nick Carraway being in a sanitarium later in his life, looking back at this moment, which is not in the original book. So this is an addition. And I think that's his first weakness. Is I think that kind of framing technique doesn't add any value. Effectively, by the end, it makes you think that he's written the story of the Great Gatsby, right? And I just don't think that adds any value to this particular kind of storytelling for a couple of reasons, and it's mainly around the Nick character. And so I'm gonna go off on a tiny little rant here, but it all comes back around,
Go
right?
for it.
So
Go
because the
for it.
second decision that he made that I didn't think was very, very wise was that there is no relationship between Nick and the Jordan character, the golfer, the female golfer,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah,
movie.
yeah.
They're just friends in the movie. Now in the book, they
Mm,
have a relationship. And why
mm,
I think it's important that it should have been pulled through kind of links to the framing device as well, is because so what happens is in this film, they're just friends, but actually, I think Nick needs to have the relationship with Jordan because it's about what is the role of Nick, right? So Nick's character is the unreliable narrator. He's the outsider. He is actually us, right? He takes us as the audience into that world. He's uncomfortable in that world, and he's uncomfortable in that world because thematically this is about the great American dream, and actually Fitzgerald's sort of very cynical view of the downside of the great American dream, right? So Nick's character needs to feel discomfort, right? So actually by putting him in there the way Luhrmann has, he's not really very uncomfortable because he doesn't have a relationship with anyone. He kind of skirts around the edges. But in the novel, his relationship with Jordan is really discordant. They're physically mismatched. They're very different people. The relationship is is kind of half baked. He makes a comment and says, "I'm half in love with her," because it becomes a metaphor for his discomfort within that world. And actually, the line towards the end, after Myrtle's been killed and they go back to Daisy's house, and Jordan says to him, "Are you coming inside?" And he said, "No, I'm going. I've had enough." And she said, "Have you had enough today?" And he said, "No, I've had enough of all of it." That's the point that he breaks up with her. But that is about him rejecting that whole life, if you like. And it's really important because that point of him rejecting that life and that world kind of justifies why he's in there. He goes through that journey for us basically to show us that this is a world that is fragile and heading towards destruction kind of thing. And so yeah, so I just think it misses because and then actually the flip side, my last little rant, is that then that renders Jordan's role irrelevant in this movie.
Yeah,
What does
yeah.
Jordan's character actually do? Nothing. In the book, she also gives us a view into the life of Daisy, which helps us understand Daisy's past. That doesn't come up. So, actually, in this film, we've kind of got a narrator who is kind of unanchored and a partner, girlfriend character that isn't. So, then is actually doesn't really do anything in terms of moving the plot forward, I don't think. What do you
You've
think?
just you no, I completely agree. And I'm just imagining these characters like bowling pins now, and you've just knocked two of them straight down, like, and it's like, I'm just like, I'm worried for the rest of these characters.
It's
No, no,
only
but you are
those two.
absolutely right.
It just, yeah.
You're absolutely spot on, though. It is, these are characters that had a role in the story, and as you say, it's showing, not just telling. And I think Nick
Mm.
Carraway is doing a lot of telling in this movie
Oh, so much telling, so much exposition.
instead of
Mm.
living in that world and
Mm.
experiencing that world. And he's hanging out with characters rather than being
Being
a
in it.
human being in the world. Yeah, and
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's funny because when you think about the parties are used as kind of big tentpole sections of this movie. And it's about you being yourself, isn't it, in these types of moments. And it's about letting go, or it's about kind of opening yourself up to other people coming into your life or whatever. And it's, yeah, the character who is entering into this world doesn't really, yeah, just doesn't feel like he's doing anything really in this world. I
Yeah.
I I did find that the framing, the framing device was annoying. I the idea of him then going to work in the stock, going back to work in the stock market and all that. And I know he was in the stock market. Was he in the book? He
Yeah, I
was
think
kind of
so. I
working his way up that initially. I think
think
he
so.
was. I think
Yeah.
there's some fidelity there. But I just remember thinking, you're going off to fight in the Second World War in a few years. I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
in a good few years, but still,
Yeah.
um, I shouldn't be feeling like your most your most interesting chapter of your life has yet to come.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. Definitely.
you
But
know,
then equally, again, back to the framing device, he's there in that sanitarium because he is, if you look at it shows his record and it says, alcoholism or whatever. But then he makes several references through the film to the fact that this was the second time I've ever had a drink. I've only been drunk twice in my life, and this was the second time at that
yeah,
first party. And it was over like the period of a summer, essentially, right? And I just didn't really buy that whole hedonistic life had made him into that person
yeah.
when actually he walked away from it, and yeah, just it didn't quite gel for me. And I don't actually know, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on why they did that. Like, I just can't for the life of me work out what they were trying to achieve with it.
You see, I think a lot of this boils down to the fact that this isn't a big story. This isn't,
Mm.
and I think Family Guy nailed this when they criticize. He said, they do a moment where he says, uh, a lot of coincidences for an American classic, eh? And then, later on, it's like, okay, well, I think we should have this exact same conversation now in a hotel room in downtown. And then they go to the hotel, and it's like, and Peter says something like, "I'm beginning to think this isn't a very good book." And I was like, wow, actually, you are kind of hitting the nail on the head here. I like the book, I enjoy the book, I think the writing carries you through the book. But I have to say, if I wrote that as a treatment for a movie, it would not be, the question would be, why are they moving from one place to another? Why are they doing, why are they, So I do
Yeah.
feel that I understand why Baz Luhrmann expanded the points, because I think I would be thinking the same if I had been tasked with adapting this. I think I'd be saying, yeah, this story needs to go. I'm sorry, I just want to give credit where credit is due. Craig Pierce as well,
Yes, that's right. Screenwriter. Yeah.
longtime collaborator, isn't
Yeah. Yeah.
he? Uh, I'm criticizing and I'm saying I need to give them their credit. But I understand the logic behind, we need to reconfigure these ingredients a little bit. But yeah, I don't think they've contributed greatly to the overall storytelling by doing what you
Yeah.
said. I think that's
Yeah.
why they've done what they've done, is because I don't believe that the book itself is this ready to go, ready to, it's not this template for a great movie. I know,
Yeah.
you're a big fan of Robert Redford original
Yeah.
film
Version. Yeah.
adaptation.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not familiar with that movie as much. I think I saw it years ago, but I don't think I was really paying attention to it. What do you think about, what is it about? I mean, how is Nick presented in that film, and is it a stronger version, do you think?
Yeah, I think that goes to the heart of a lot of it too. And I think, well, yeah, because I think it's an actor called, I think it's Sam Waters, I think, who plays the Nick character. And I think, there's an issue, well, there's a question around casting in this, which I have read a little bit about. A lot of people were very unhappy with the casting of this movie and the choice of actors into the casting. But I think the Nick Carraway one is a good example, because that in the original version, there's just a cachet about the guy that Toby Maguire, for me at least, doesn't quite get there on. And I think in terms of all the characters, I think Robert Redford um, is just the ultimate, for me, the ultimate Jay Gatsby. I think he if you go back to the themes for the Gatsby character, it's about the desire for validation, the desire for love, the desire for justice. In his mind, is his kind of, and I think there's a depth to that. There's a depth to what Gatsby wants, and the sadness of him, if you like, that the Redford version manages to bring out. It's a much quieter version. It's plays it in much quieter, much more serious. And I just felt for me from reading it, and I read it at school, and then I read it like later, um, and it really stayed with me as a book. So, but I'm not one of these people that gets really literary purist. I'm not. It's not about it has to be exactly like the book. But I just felt that his character was better portrayed, and also the other one was Daisy, the Mia Farrow character, was just like it was just that she managed to capture this fragility and craziness in a way that was really cool, because I think that's the essence of Daisy. Is it's this really weird balance between she's absolutely nuts, but she's kind of just absolutely enchanting as well. And I just think that connection, and then the Nick character as the sort of observer or the outsider looking in, and managed to just, I don't know, just managed to bridge that gap a little bit for me that I felt was in this version, because I just felt a little disconnect. I don't know. I mean, what did you think about casting and the actors? I have to just say, very just caveat it by saying I love every one of those actors in Gatsby
Yeah.
independently and as actors, and I think they're all brilliant. Which is what just blows me away, is that it just didn't work for me in this film, but they're all amazing.
I never realized how much I loved Tobey Maguire after seeing him in the new Spider-Man. I don't think it's a spoiler to say he's in the new Spider-Man movie at this point. But I just, there was something about him there. God, I feel like falling in love all over again with superhero movies. I just thought, like, yeah, he's the first one. There he
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
And this is something. But I have to say, I understand why Tobey Maguire is in this movie. He's best friends with Leonardo DiCaprio in real life, and it's
Right.
probably a pet project for them to do this movie
Right.
together. But I think the issue I have with Tobey Maguire in that role is he's too high profile like an actor, and I think if he's meant to be the role of it, now I know everybody in that film was pretty high profile at that point,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
if the idea is that Nick Carraway shouldn't be played by an actor more high profile than the guy who plays Tom Buchanan, the antagonist.
Yes. Yes.
That's my,
Good
Joel
point.
Edgerton's fantastic actor.
Yeah.
Loved him in the new Obi-Wan series.
Yeah.
But the and he really is a phenomenal actor, Joel Edgerton. But
He's
the
an
idea of
amazing actor.
him,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting point, because I was wondering, I was just trying to work out what is it that isn't working for me here when I'm looking at all these actors who independently I absolutely love, like every one of them, Kerry Mulligan, Joel Edgerton,
Carey
like they're
Mulligan's
brilliant.
fantastic.
Isla Fisher, they're all great, and it's just like, hang on, and even Jack Thompson, who plays the shrink in the sanitarium at the beginning, very well known, sort of iconic Australian actor. It just falls flat, and I was like, hang on a second, like even Jack Nicholson is um not sorry, Jack Thompson. Geez, sorry. Even Jack Thompson is not is not. It's just not working for him. What is happening? And I wonder if that's it. Maybe it is that it's just too heavy with names. It's too hard to separate ourselves. That willing suspension of disbelief is hard to get to when you've got all this. You're caught up in looking at these actors.
I also feel that you could have anybody in this movie, and it would still suffer from the fact, and I'm not gonna. There are some few positive points I want to mention as well, just from my own experience watching it. But I do feel this is a film very tied up in the spectacle of the party. It's the spectacle. It's the audio sensation of the music and all that kind of stuff. And it's very much a piece of cinema in the true sense. It's everything. It's not and there are some films where it's like the screenplay is 80% of the work, and
Yeah,
the film itself is just bringing that screenplay to life. And there are some times where you can tell the movie is 80% of the work, and the screenplay is like just thing.
yeah,
It does feel like
yeah,
sometimes they don't care. This felt
yeah,
very much like it's maybe 30% screenplay, 30% visual, 30% sound. It felt like this was like a lot of Baz Luhrmann films, a real tapestry of media coming together.
yeah. Yeah.
And that might sound like I'm being negative about the storytelling, but sometimes the script is not the be all and end all. It is one key cornerstone, but there are other cornerstones. And there are certain
Yeah.
filmmakers like Baz Luhrmann where I think they don't rely on one cornerstone. You can tell, I think, Quentin Tarantino, for example, the script is the cornerstone, the only cornerstone of his films.
Yes.
And everything else then is just a brilliant response, sometimes anyway, brilliant response to that. Martin Scorsese, to me, feels like it's slightly the other way around. It's like it might be a very strong directorial vision for this script, and that becomes the cornerstone, and everything else, then the script can get thrown out then in some instances. Continuity can get thrown out and things like that, and just great editing takes over. And he just got that really strong visual style. And to me, it does feel like Baz Luhrmann has more than just one cornerstone when he's
Yeah.
building his films, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
why I feel
definitely.
the script doesn't I don't think there's a single Baz Luhrmann film where the script could be argued as being perfect. Like, this is a
Mm.
masterpiece of screenwriting. I think
Screenwriting. Yeah.
because even Strictly Ballroom, as I said, has some weird structural kind of pacing issues in it, but they are
Yeah.
seamlessly. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
because he knows how to fix them. So
Yeah.
I feel that's what's happening with Gatsby and among others. But I do think Gatsby is very reliant on a spectacle that, if you're not into it, it's hard to get into this story. Like, I know people who
Yeah.
don't like Kanye West, they don't like Lana Del Rey, they don't care about Beyonce or anything, and so for them the music just didn't work. And I know people then who went to see it specifically because they love that kind of music. and
Yeah.
and it definitely, I think, yeah, it's a very much, you're either gonna like it or you're not, I think, in many respects.
Yeah. Yeah, and look,
Uh,
I'm fine with the adaptation, and I'm fine with the,
mm,
use your different cornerstones and, add to it where you need to. I think that's great, except where you've got a film that has come from is a thing in its own right around will because I just felt like, and if I'm really honest with myself, I feel like what has happened is Baz has gone, Great Gatsby, 1920s, all about the flappers, the amazing music, in between the wars, crazy America. What a great opportunity to create a film about it. Like, what a rich subject matter. Correct. So yeah, do that. But what I think gets missed in the spectacle is the story. And the story is actually almost about the opposite. It's almost as if the kind of extraordinary visual that we see through Luhrmann's adaptation blinds us to what is actually going on, which is actually a story about the downside of that world, the negativity of that great American dream, that hedonism gone unchecked kind of thing. And we see that because we see that with the death of Myrtle. Gets killed from the kind of craziness that had happened before and gets run over. And it becomes, so that's the thing. It's the kind of the warning in a way, it's the cautionary tale bit. But that kind of gets lost, I think.
do you feel F. Scott Fitzgerald would look at this movie? I mean, obviously, he would probably end up going to an institution afterwards, because he'd be like, "What the hell did I just witness?" Not because the film is bad or anything. Just this. Imagine,
Yeah.
imagine him seeing a film that being his, like,
Oh yeah. Because
like an
because
introduction to
wasn't
modern cinema.
exactly,
The
because
colors, the
wasn't this
music,
shot?
everything.
This was shot in 3D, I think, too,
Yeah, yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
it?
yeah,
Like,
yeah. I saw it
I
in
didn't
3D.
see
Yeah,
that. Did
yeah,
you? Oh
yeah,
wow. What
yeah,
was
yeah.
that like?
Yeah, it was all right. It did feel that I was getting certain scenes so that they could be 3D. Like the moment where Nick Carraway is like he's writing, The Great Gatsby,
Yeah.
and you just see the words kind of falling, or the words are kind
Oh
of coming out of the page, and it's very much like,
yeah.
you're like, you did this for the 3D glasses, not because you had this great vision for it. So there are moments like that. But do you think F. Scott Fitzgerald, if he saw this film, or if he read the script for the film, would say to Baz, like, you've missed the point of what this is. It does feel like sometimes I watch these movies where they're adaptations, and it's you're you've locked into the one thing that this film isn't really about, and you've made it about that,
Yeah.
and you've completely missed the point of
Yeah.
the other things. And do you think that's what Baz has done? Do you think F. Scott Fitzgerald would be saying that to
Would be
Baz?
sad about that. Yeah, look, I think so. But I did read somewhere about F. Scott Fitzgerald's granddaughter, I think it was in an article saying, "Oh, my grandfather," I think it was the grand, something like that. Anyway, some relation, and she said, "Oh, he would be so proud to see Luhrmann's version." So I thought that was kind of surprising because I think he has missed a trick with it, and it's not that it's bad. I love Baz's filmmaking. It's just not for this film, really. That's kind of it. But I don't know. I mean, it'd be fascinating, wouldn't it, to see
Yeah, yeah,
maybe
yeah,
we've all interpreted it incorrectly over these years. He's like, no,
yeah.
that's exactly right. I don't
But
know.
again, you know what? I say this. I think it's a skeletal enough story. Not totally skeletal, but there are parts of it where it's skeletal enough that I think it allows for great storytellers like Baz Luhrmann to then bring in their interpretation. And I would love to see
Yeah,
a variety of different interpretations of the Great Gatsby over time, and
yeah,
just explore
yeah,
what those stories could look like. I have a question for you regarding, and just sorry, just there was one point I wanted to make. So you had talked about, your idea that Baz is just attracted to that period of time because it's got all that promise,
yeah.
but maybe missing the point then of the story. um it's interesting because I was reading on the trivia section of IMDb. They were saying that the film takes place in 1922, but there are shots of the Chrysler and the Empire State Building being
Oh,
constructed,
yeah,
and they didn't begin until 28 and 30 respectively. And I do think,
yeah.
little things like that. I always think, I refuse to believe the visual effects designers and production designers didn't just do a quick Google search,
I know, right?
because
How hard can
even
it
I'll do
be?
that, right? And I'm always forgiving of little inconsistencies or errors like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
I call them for what they are, and it's I don't care that it's an inconsistency. I want the Chrysler Building. I want this. I want that. And
yeah,
I do agree with you on that idea that it's more about the attraction to that period
yeah.
rather than the um it's overriding the attraction that he has to the story as well, if that makes
I
sense. Yeah.
think so too. I think so too. Yeah. Hey, quick question for you. How did you feel about that? Because, and I agree with you on the whole Chrysler Building and stuff. I'm not fussed about any of that. That doesn't,
Mm.
I'm
Yeah, no, I
like,
don't
it's
care. I wouldn't
historic.
know if I didn't read it. Yeah.
No, 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 exactly. How did you feel about the contemporary music in the historical piece, if you like?
I didn't hate it, and that's the point I was going to get to, right? So
All
I
right.
went to see this the same day as a friend of mine went to see it, and I just kind of remember kind of chuckling to myself, thinking he's gonna hate this film. I went to see it because I like Baz Luhrmann, I like Strictly Ballroom, but that's not his kind of film.
Yeah.
And he'd be more interested in you know Jurassic Park or something like that,
Right.
and I went to, and he came, we met up then the next day, and he loved it. He absolutely loved it.
Ah,
He said it was amazing. And it was that thing that he really loved, that juxtaposition of the past and present, in terms of
yeah.
styles. And
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who have really latched onto it. And I do think this film has become a real kind of pop culture phenomenon, in the sense of how many birthday invitations have you seen,
Oh,
either in a store or received in the mail, that have the Gatsby thing? How many people
it's
how
true.
many costume parties have you come across, or seen on
Yeah.
Facebook pictures or Instagram, whatever, of people decked out in Great Gatsby gear?
Yeah.
um, the production designer and Baz Luhrmann, all their kind of combined vision, uh, kept you know stationary stationary shops in business for a long time, like, because of that.
Oh my gosh,
It's
yeah, absolutely. And memes, there's a million memes. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And it still is, right? But it goes back to the heart of it. Like if you've got a filmmaker who is attracted to that period in history, and it is presented to all of us historically as an extraordinary time, an exciting time, particularly in America. That American lens of the 1920s, early 1920s, is kind of, it's seductive. We don't think of it in the, well, that 1922, when it was set, in 1929 we're going into the biggest global crash. There's we don't look at it as a terrible time. We look at it as an extraordinary time, and it's beautiful and all the good things. We're all attracted to the image of the 1920s is amazing. So it makes sense then, if you have a filmmaker who's grabbed that and created this big spectacle, that's going to then seep through, and it then reinforces our ideas about the 1920s. And you're going to come to a flapper party. Here's your Leonardo DiCaprio invitation, with your gold Art Deco designs behind it. It kind of makes sense and actually reinforces that idea that that's sort of where his head was at. But yeah, so you like you're okay with the music? You like it?
Look, I'm not bowled over by it, but I do think it's easy. It makes for easy viewing. I think it's a film that can take you back in time, or it doesn't have to take you back in time if that's too much effort for you. Do you know what I mean? It does feel like it's getting to have its cake and eat it too, in terms of the spectacle. There are some films where, like, for example, another DiCaprio film, I love The Aviator, the Martin Scorsese film. I just really love that film. I'm fascinated by Howard Hughes as a character, and so I'm really, like, I think very problematic character, or problematic person, but also a very fascinating, rise to the top and so on. And I just find it a very interesting story, and that film stylistically is so, I think, brilliant. I think it's one of Scorsese's just masterpieces that never gets talked about. But it's not a film I can watch all the time, because it requires, I need to kind of be ready to go back and take that trip back in time. I think Gatsby manages to avoid having to have that energy, and it's like it's the perfect Netflix movie for many people. I think that you can just have on the background then.
Definitely.
So I feel like it's and in that regard, let's be honest, I mean, that's probably a studio's dream, to have a film like that.
God, absolutely. And look, it does bring people in. I think music I think in this film does two things. It does allow the comparison, which I think is supposed to be in there, between the sort of then and now. Like, are we in the kind of similar hedonistic? Maybe not now, but maybe when it was filmed, when it came out. We're in that sort of post-COVID, trying to haul ourselves up. So slightly different, but I think back for when it came out, for sure. So there's that. But then the other thing is, it does help sell a movie, right? Particularly like a Jay-Z or whatever is going to help you sell a movie. But the other thing about it is, it sort of also dates a movie too. If you think about other films where you've got that contemporary, and it's sort of, and I don't know, it's a real double-edged sword, because I quite liked it in this film. But it's a funny thing. It's got, if you compare it to any number of films that have a Hans Zimmer score through it, they become kind of timeless. They become kind of, it doesn't set you at a particular, like, I was looking at a clip from The Holiday, the movie, the Cameron Diaz and Kate Winslet movie, just the other day, and that's got a Hans Zimmer score in it. And I thought it's really interesting how that gives itself a timelessness of when that movie was made because of that. And so there's an interesting thing, I think, happens with contemporary music. But for the purposes of this film, I think it worked quite well. And I think definitely it did bring people to the film that may not have otherwise, it does open doors, I think, for audiences, which is important. So, hey, quick one. Did you see the little Easter egg, or what? I don't know if it's an Easter egg. It's not an Easter egg, but in the film, in the scene, I didn't know if you picked it up in the scene where it's the first time Daisy comes to the party with Gatsby, and she's in the middle of the dance floor and she's dancing with Gatsby, and a couple whizzes by her, and the gentleman in the couple says, "Oh, great party, Gatsby." Did you know who that is?
Are you telling me it's Scott from Strictly Ballroom?
It's Doug Hastings. It's Scott's dad.
No way. Okay. I thought you were going to say for a moment it's Scott and Fran. I would have fallen off my chair.
Oh my god, that would have been hilarious.
But Doug, Doug. I gotta go back and check. I gotta go back and check it out. But I knew you were going to say Strictly Ballroom.
But I thought that was
Um,
lovely, right? That was a really nice little
yeah,
nod.
yeah.
And he was so cute. So anyway, check it out. But yeah, that was kind of cute. So he got brownie points for that after all my
He gets brownie
my
points.
criticism.
One last very quick thing because I know we need to wrap up,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, sure.
So, Meyer Wolfsheim's character, right?
Oh yes, yeah,
In the book, am I right in saying it's believed he made his fortune through fixing the World Series?
yes, correct.
Okay. I had
Yes,
always
correct.
read I had always read it that Gatsby's money was Wolfsheim's money. And that Gatsby was a front. And I could be completely wrong, but I'm sure I'm misremembering the book. And
The
and
Gatsby. Okay.
that Gatsby's like a front for Wolfsheim to I might be pronouncing his surname wrong, but
Oh, yeah. No, I
um
think that's right.
for the money. That's like you fix the World Series, all eyes are on you. But we need
Got you.
to
Yes, you need
we
a
but it's
you need
like
a
and that's how Gatsby
stooge.
got his money so quickly after the war, you
Ah,
know? And
okay.
that's why he
Yeah.
pisses it away at parties and all that. That was kind of I could be completely wrong, and I'm sure I am. But I think I'm misremembering the story, and I think it's one of those things that I love about the story that I'm sure I just made up in my head like over several years, you know.
Yeah. That
I would have
makes perfect
loved.
sense, though.
It sounds good, doesn't it?
It makes
If
perfect
I
sense. I really
pat
like
myself on the
that.
back,
Yeah.
but I thought they were playing with some interesting ideas about Gatsby's money and about how he does his business and Wolfsheim's relationship with him in the movie. And it was one of the things I enjoyed about it. There was a bit of mystery about him. And I remember lots of people like that I would talk to about the film afterwards would say like, yeah, what was up with their relationship? You know, it was this very interesting thing that they had kind of built up in the movie. And there's that great line
Mm.
where he says, Sir Chicago's on the phone. He's like, not now, you know, and this kind of thing, which I used to imitate all the time
Yeah.
whenever the phone would ring. And it was just it does feel like that he was having a bit of fun with that. And I would have liked to
It's really
explore that
interesting.
relationship with them a bit more because the eyes was the book cover, you know. Wolfsheim is what isn't that
Yes,
the
that's
thing?
right. That's right.
He's watching you, you know.
That's right.
And
And that's why you've got it in the when they drive past where
yeah,
Myrtle lives. It's just there as well on the wall. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just so it felt
Yeah.
like that was one area that I would have liked to have had for them to have a bit of creative license with and let
Yeah.
explore a little bit.
That's a really good point, actually. I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, you're right, because it is still quite shrouded in mystery, isn't it? It's not really, it's all very inferred and there's nothing particularly, well, there's nothing overt at all about it. You don't
They've
really
taken
get much
creative
of an
liberties
explanation.
with Nick's role in the story,
Yeah.
but not
Yeah.
with the actual criminal component of the story, which could have
That's
been so
right.
fascinating, I think, you know. Anyway.
The only thing about that is that I do think in this version, I think you get more of a sense of of the corruption of Gatsby, where I think again, just if you hark back to the original, the 1974 version, um, Gatsby as a character was much more innocent, seemed to be much more innocent. Again, it was you didn't really understand, you didn't have all the exact what had happened, but I just remember that getting, and I remember with this version thinking, oh, he comes across as a character that's really much shadier. We have less empathy for him, I think, in this version. Yeah, which is interesting. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe the next version, someone could kind of, maybe there's a Wolfsheim version or a Wolfsheim movie that someone could
I
make.
wonder
What's
is the
his
story in the
story?
public domain? Is it?
Hmm. I
It
don't know.
must I think it might be.
Good question.
Um anyway,
Anyway,
we'll leave it there
okay.
because we need to wrap up.
We need to get on.
Good chat, Fiona.
Okay.
We'll do
Nice to chat.
another
What's next? What's
Bazmataz.
next?
We'll get back to our listeners on that one.
Yeah, we
Or will
will.
we
We'll
just pick
find.
now? Romeo and
Well, come
Juliet?
on. All right.
Romeo and Juliet.
It's
Let's
good.
do it.
Yeah, Romeo and Juliet. Okay, good. Sounds good.
Okay. Guys, thanks very much for listening. Do check us out wherever you get your podcast, Script Department. You know where to find us by now. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Buy us a coffee if you want to support the channel. Check out our community on thescriptdepartment.net. We'll be back to check out Romeo and Juliet in a few weeks because I'm going away soon. So,
Mm.
Yeah. Thanks again, Fiona, and thanks very much, guys.
Pleasure. Thanks, guys.